Going live.
Welcome to the Mountain Plains Minority Supplier Development Council Virtual Townhall Series. The COVID-19 crisis has made a huge impact on all of us as we adjust to working remotely and meeting remotely. MPMSD continues to be deeply concerned about our MBEs and corporate members. We welcome you to the second of our virtual townhouse series focused specifically on minority business enterprise. I am Belinda Hooks, your virtual townhouse host and market president for the Mountain Plains Minority Supplier Development Council. Today's topic is immediate, inclusive, regional economic support for minority enterprises. Today's virtual town hall will give you a front row seat to hear from and pose questions to four very distinguished panelists. Emmanuel Cleaver is now serving his 7th term representing Missouri's 5th congressional district, the home district of President Harry Truman. He is a member of the House Committee on Financial Services, chair of the Subcommittee of National Security, International Development, and Monetary Policy, member of Subcommittee on Housing, Community Development, and Insurance, member of House Committee on Homeland Security, member of the Subcommittee on Transportation and Maritime Security, and member of the Select Committee on the Modernization of Congress.
David.
Having served for 12 years on the City Council of Missouri's largest municipality, Kansas City, Cleaver was elected as the city's first African mayor in 1991. Please help us in welcoming Congressman Emmanuel Cleaver.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you, and hopefully we can provide some information. I'm thrilled to have my colleague, Congresswoman Sharice Davids from the 3rd District over in Kansas. I was telling some people earlier today in the media that if we'd had a freshman of the year, it would clearly have been Sharice Davids. She's been remarkable, and I'm thrilled to serve with her. Let me just also say that I'm hoping that all of you will do whatever is necessary to keep yourselves healthy. This is a novel coronavirus. The coronaviruses have been around a long time, but this is new, as the name would suggest, and it is very, very dangerous, and maybe one of the most mobile viruses that we have had in this country ever, in terms of its ability to go from person to person to person. So please take care of yourselves. I have my mask right here. I have my gloves, and I don't go out hardly at all. This is the first time I've been out in 4 or 5 days, but I wear it. The pandemic is awful. It has impacted every part of our lives and disrupted our routines. You know, as a pastor, you go to church, and one of the things everybody is looking to get, and that's a hug, even if they don't get them any other place. So that hurt, but it's also done enormous damage to the economy, and I don't think we will get to the place we once held economically until this is all over, and then some months. Anytime we have any major legislation, the Congressional Black Caucus, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, and the Asian Pacific Caucus are all trying to make sure that there is MBE participation, and we certainly have been trying to make sure we have money set aside for minorities. And so we'll continue to push for and advocate for assisting minority businesses, and we want to make sure that they are around when this coronavirus is defeated. And we, for example, we have one group of individuals whose sole job it is to try to make sure that some of the money that's going out of the door from the Treasury will end up in minority banks, and we have been, fighting with the Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin since we began to make sure that there are minority banks participating. And the CARES Act that we all are functioning under today provided for lenders to lend money or to disperse money to individuals, in particular small businesses, and who would then serve underserved communities. Many of these small businesses have been able to go out and apply for the small business loans, and many of them have gotten them. We've had about 300 in all loans that have gone out the door so far, but we ran out of money at midnight last night, and the leadership in both parties are negotiating, primarily Nancy Pelosi and Steven Mnuchin, trying to do an interim funding program that would fill the empty pot we had in the small business loans, and we will have another stimulus. This will probably be about $2 trillion, and the $2 trillion will go in part for infrastructure because they create the most jobs, and then secondly to address many of the issues that we're concerned about. I'm particularly concerned about money going to hospitals, Children's Mercy Hospitals, Truman, the indigent care hospitals, and then local governments who are spending a lot of money and with very, very little, if any money coming in. Just as a former mayor, I can tell you cities need the sales tax revenues, in Kansas City in particular, but there are no sales tax revenues to speak of because all of the retail entities are closed down. And so we've got to help these local governments. And finally, we've got to make sure that there is greater access to the PPEs, the payroll participation program. I get PPEs and PPPs mixed up. I'm trying to keep them separate. So there's a lot of work to be done. There are people working who are in Washington working right now, and so I would simply yield now to my colleague.
Thank you, Congressman. Congresswoman Sharice Davids took the nation by storm with her election to the United States 116th Congress representing Kansas 12th District. Davis was raised by a single mother who served in the Army for 20 years. After graduating from Leavenworth High School, she worked her way through Johnson County Community College and the University of Missouri, Kansas City, before earning a law degree from Cornell Law School. As a first-generation college student, Davis worked the entire time she was in college and understands the importance of quality public schools and affordable higher education. In Congress, Davis is putting Kansans first, working to limit the influence of special interests and fighting to make healthcare more affordable and accessible to everyone. She is one of the first two Native American women to serve in Congress and sits on the Transportation and Infrastructure and Small Business Committees. Please help me in welcoming Congresswoman Sharice Davids.
Good afternoon. Hopefully everyone can hear me clearly. First, I just want to start off by saying thank you so much for inviting me here. Congressman Cleaver, I am so thrilled to be serving in Congress with you, and so much appreciated all the words that you shared earlier and the topics that you were covering. I would, when I got to Congress, I realized how often people say, I'd like to associate myself with my colleagues' remarks, and I would do that right now. So I think the first thing I want to acknowledge and just kind of say is that this is such a difficult time. The situation that we find ourselves in with this public health crisis, it has uprooted and changed every single one of our lives in different ways, but it has definitely impacted every single one of us. And that's true for our business leaders like yourselves, employers, workers, and certainly our public health is dependent right now on all of us, if we can, staying home, because we might be saving the lives of the folks who are not able to stay home right now, who are our healthcare workers, the folks who are keeping our grocery stores running and delivering things. So I just want to acknowledge all of that. And I've been hearing firsthand from business owners across the KC metro area and the region about how the coronavirus is impacting businesses and folks' livelihoods. And this is from the conversation I've been having, and then also talking to my colleagues like Congressman Cleaver, I know that this is particularly true for our minority business enterprises. MBEs already face barriers, and those barriers right now are being exacerbated by this health crisis. And while we're living in an unprecedented time, I want to make sure that folks know that our office, and I know Congressman Cleaver's office too, we're doing everything we can for our community here. And I know that our community and country and the folks I'm sure on this call too, if anything, we're resilient, and we're going to be able to get through a lot of this, and we're going to do that by working together. And I know we're going to discuss this later, but and Congressman Cleaver touched on a bit of it, but we've passed the 3 bipartisan relief packages, and that the most recent package was the CARES Act, and that was designed to help keep our economy and particularly small businesses afloat during this unprecedented economic uncertainty that we're seeing. But the legislation was far from perfect. I think that you probably saw this before the call. I know Congressman Cleaver was talking about how the Paycheck Protection Program, or the PPP, ran out of money today. This is, in a lot of ways, I've been saying that there are 2 things that need to happen. We need guidance from the administration on the Paycheck Protection Program, because right now what we've seen is, without guidance, the decision making has been left to banks, and we're seeing a lot of people being left out of the program. And Congress needs to make sure that we're properly funding that program. And so we're hoping to get some more resources into that program, because it's unacceptable for us to not be able to support our small businesses. I mean, this is the backbone of our economy we're talking about. I've called on the leaders of our party to step up. I know I'm constantly hearing Congressman Cleaver advocating for, well, you all heard it. He's advocating for us to make sure that everybody is getting access to to these programs and the relief, not just the well-connected, the people who already have strong relationships with big banks. And so I want to make sure that folks know that my office is really prioritizing Kansas and the Midwest, because the importance of the economy here in the KC metro area is, we have to make sure we're investing in the Midwest. It's vital to the economic security of the entire country, and we have to make sure, and we're doing just that our region's not overlooked when we're talking about relief packages, when we're talking about getting things like the personal protective equipment. We've been fighting really hard to make sure we get some of the testing supplies and the masks and the gowns and the gloves and all the things that we need to keep people safe. And I'm gonna stop there because I know we're gonna get to some questions. I really appreciate you inviting me today. I'm looking forward to the conversation. And just one quick plug: if folks if you need assistance with the federal government, please call one of our district offices. We've got one in Overland Park and one in KCK, and our website is davids.house.gov. I want our office to be a strong partner for MBEs, so please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you, Congresswoman Davids. Dale Gines, Senior Community Development Advisor for the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City, Omaha office. He focuses on innovative community development strategies designed to help transform rural and inner city communities. Dale is a nationally recognized speaker on the subject of entrepreneurship-based economic development and is the author of Grow Your Own Guide, a short primer on how to build rural economies using entrepreneurship. In 2013, he designed and launched Econ Avenue, an innovative grassroots-led community economic development project that received national attention when Federal Reserve Board Chair Janet Yellen referenced it in her first public speech. Dale is a certified economic developer and highly sought for his astute analysis. Please help me in welcoming Mr. Dale Gines.
Well, thank you, everybody. Before I get started, I want to express my appreciation to both of our congressional representatives on this call. Appreciate the fact that you all were able to, get the stimulus money out fast. And I know that there were hurdles, some of which I will talk about, but I believe in this time it's important that we have a bias towards action versus deliberation, even though we need a good balance between both. So I would like to express my appreciation to both of you, as well as Mountain Plains Minority Supplier Development Council for all the work that you do, especially in this tough time, where we're really trying to keep our communities of color and their entrepreneurs, present, in all the deliberations of policy. And I do also want to express, the standard thing, and Belinda, Marvin, all of the team know the views in this presentation do not necessarily represent the views of the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City or the Federal Reserve Bank system. And also, I'm wearing a tie for the first time in 5 weeks, so that's kind of exciting. There's a little party going over here in the Gines household in Omaha, even though we're about to get to 6 inches of snow. So I've done a lot of outreach, over the past couple of weeks, to minority, non-minority businesses, rural businesses, national stakeholders. And, while we are absolutely facing an unprecedentedly tough time for minority businesses, I am excited about the fact that I'm seeing collaboration in ways that I've never seen before. A lot of chambers and similar type of organizations are participating across race and ethnic lines to join together, support each other, and really try to mobilize on behalf of the entrepreneurs in which they serve. Marvin Lyman from the Mountain Plains participates in a regular call with myself and the minority chambers in the greater Kansas City metro area. I know something similar is happening out in Denver with the diverse, chambers out there. And then across our states, we're seeing, unique and innovative things that are popping up to support the entrepreneurs even outside of the federal stimulus money. I know Makisha Booth from Denver, created a fund and got a fund funded for $2,500 each for Black women, about half within the Denver marketplace and the other half across her national network. All cap CDFI fund in Greater Kansas City was funded for $5 million through their CDFI, support a wide array of businesses, as well as in our Congresswoman's state. Kansas had the Hire Act, where they launched $5 million businesses through the $5 million in loan funds to the Commerce Department, spread out and delivered through, a bunch of my friends at Network Kansas. Phenomenal. I have a link up if you want to listen to the interview on how they deployed 340 loans in 3 days, which is unprecedented as well. So there's a lot going on. People are pulling together in ways that they can, and we just need to continue to do that. If I could stress anything else, it would be that collaboration and working together is going to be key to getting us out of this. The government will continue to do stimulus to the best that they can, but it still takes us all working together because this is going to be a hard one. And we've already seen that it's a hard one. And so what are some of the current challenges that we're facing? There's absolutely a limitation of funding. So I'm really glad to hear our Congress members stating that they're looking to potentially refund that. We know that this funding limitations hit minorities harder. From the conversations that I've had, difficulty in applying to banks, being waitlisted by banks, having uncertainty of the rules of how to apply, not having the infrastructure in place to apply, information lags, information that's not culturally responsive in languages that some of our ethnic entrepreneurs can understand has all been a huge hindrance. We also know that the majority of our small businesses of color are overwhelmingly small, so it was difficult for them to fit into anywhere within the stimulus. And often they were waitlisted by banks too because they were very small or didn't have a previous banking relationship. So those are things we need to work out. There's a mistrust, and this is unfortunate. I've heard a lot of mistrust from some of our individuals that work with African American communities, feeling like because of the history that the stimulus wasn't for them, or that they wouldn't be accepted, or just confusion or worry about things like, if I apply and get PPP, will they take my business if I don't pay it back? So a lot of confusion in those ways. And these are a lot of things that I think we need to continue to collectively work to smooth out if we really want to serve our MDEs and communities of color well, as some of these more stimulus packages, both from the federal and the state level, come down. My biggest concern is that historically we can just, pull back a little bit to the prior recession, and the research shows that our minority businesses were hit significantly harder, and it took significantly longer for them to return. Now we have something at an even greater scale in a very acute, crisis. And I just hope that we figure out ways to, help our MBEs and entrepreneurs of color to be able to weather this storm. But unfortunately, I'm hearing that a lot are not. I deployed a mini pulse survey when it's all started, and even it was a mixed, respondents, and 20%, within that first week, I believe most of the stay-at-home orders already said that they had closed. Now, they didn't say if they had closed permanently. They did say they had closed. And so how do we get these restarted? And so I want to include, and hopefully we can go into more detail with the questions, with some things that I think from, what I've been hearing would be very helpful for us to advocate for as we go forward. One, new stimulus money, state or federal, has to be very clear in both the processes and the business impact, so that the more confusion that's in the marketplace for these entrepreneurs, the harder it is and the more fear they're going to have for application. We really need to focus on leveraging our CDFIs, local lenders, and those that are in touch with the communities of color that we want to serve, because they're trusted intermediaries for these organizations. And if they go away, if organizations like Mountain Plains go away, our minority chambers go away, and they're expressing they're having trouble receiving any stimulus funding because they're 501c6s, and they don't have any place in the PPP loans. And so we're hearing some of them already saying, these minority chambers, that their doors are going to close because they're not having membership renewals. Organizations like those go away, then we really lose a tremendous value add to our minority entrepreneurs as a trusted source of information and resources. And then we really need to look at the credit standards and the structure of these facilities, knowing that a lot of our minority firms don't have the kind of robust infrastructure that bigger firms have. They're mom and pops, and they operate in just much smaller ways, and we need to consider that as well. So I'm often in touch with nonprofits. Feel free to check our website out at the Fed, Kansas City Fed. It's kansascityfed.org, kansascityfed.org. And of course, Mountain Plains can send out my contact information to anybody if they want to chat one-on-one. So I'll turn it back over to Belinda.
Thank you, Dale. McLean Bryant Macklin is a native Kansas Citian with a passion for ensuring that everyone has equitable opportunity to succeed. She currently serves as Director of Policy and Research for the Greater Kansas City Civic Council, leading initiatives for business leaders to support equity and inclusion in the Kansas City region, as well as leading the Civic Council advocacy and public policy efforts. Previously, she served as Kansas City Mayor Sly James, Director of Policy, focusing on equity, housing, economic development, workforce, small business and entrepreneurship, and digital equity. McLean is also a lawyer, having practiced at a top 100 law firm in Washington, D.C. and Kansas City, specializing in public policy, white-collar crime, and government investigations and litigation. Please help me in welcoming McLean Bryant Macklin.
Hi, everybody. I just want to echo the thanks of Minority Plains and our congressional representatives for taking the time to do this this virtual town hall today. But also want to thank those of you who have chimed in, and rather than just sitting on the sidelines and allowing life to just happen to you, are taking a much more active role in your own relief and recovery in this COVID-19 pandemic. I guess the bright side of being last on such an esteemed panel is that the pressure is off of me to say something profound, because so much has already been said. And I really want to, just echo, my sympathy, my empathy for what minority businesses are uniquely experiencing right now. I once ran a minority business in Kansas City, and so I understand the difficulties that come with having a minority enterprise. I think that there is a much wider spread appreciation, as Del said, across different races and institutions about the heightened challenges that minority businesses are facing right now. And I'm on a call or a web meeting at least once a week that's talking about distinctly how minority businesses are being impacted and what uniquely our businesses will need as relief for the short term, and then recovery for the longer term. And these major institutions, governments, civic membership engagement organizations like mine realized that not only were minority businesses most impacted by the Great Recession, in large part because so much of our equity and our guarantees for our businesses came because of the equity in our homes. And so when the housing market tanked, we lost a lot of our nest eggs and funding. But that minority businesses also led the nation in terms of recovery from the Great Recession. And so there is an appreciation that our recovery from this pandemic and the economic consequences of it will largely be hinged as a country on the recovery of minority businesses. And so I think we should lead with that because our sustainability cannot and should not be taken for granted. I'd also like to echo some of what Del said in terms of some of the measures that will need to be taken, and our members of Congress stated this as well. Of course, there needs to be more money, but I think we also need to be more thoughtful in how those additional funds are allocated. Del talked about these rapid response funds. Kansas City has one that he mentioned that AltCap is administrating. It's a local CDFI. We need more of that. Because they are much more nimble and have the relationships that these traditional banking institutions lack. And the traditional banking institutions, are somewhat hamstrung because they have capacity issues and they're having difficulty in processing applications in a timely fashion. But we could kind of bypass that and ease the process if we just went to organizations that have those pre-existing relationships. These organizations that have traditionally lent capital to minority businesses, where these larger banking institutions that have been or are already SBA certified just have not. And so, like Del said, I mean, the banks lack the capacity to take on new borrowers. They're going to, as a matter of administrative ease and to get money out of the door more quickly, lend to borrowers that they already have a relationship with. So that leaves minority enterprises out. Moreover, it's one pot of money that is kind of be administered on a first come, first served basis. And not only do minority businesses typically have or lack the infrastructure and technologies in house to quickly go through the process, they're having to fight for this single pot, where we know that retail, hospitality, and accommodations and healthcare are the industries that are being overwhelmingly impacted right now. And those are the industry where the bulk of minority businesses are operating. And so it would make sense that there be special allocations for those industries that are the most vulnerable right now, which also happen to be where minority small business owners are concentrated. The CRA protocols, and Del, you might speak more fully to this, have been touted as a good mechanism to employ here that might provide some administrative ease because of, like you said, the direct relationships that already exist between CDFIs and minority businesses on the local level. But I guess, and I should caveat with, these are certainly my personal views and interests and don't represent the Civic Council necessarily, although I hope that, I was hired to lend this perspective to the Civic Council and all the work that we do. We are very much focused on economic inclusion, and we are very much focused on the relief and recovery of our small businesses, minority small businesses in the Kansas City region. So I will end with that because I want to make sure that we leave enough time for Q&A.
Thank you, McLean. We are so pleased to have such distinguished panelists take time to address your questions and concerns. Our moderator for the next segment of this virtual town hall is Marvin Lyman, Business Development and Corporate Relations Manager for the Mountain Plains Minority Supplier Development Council. Please help me in welcoming Marvin Lyman.
Thank you, Belinda. Good afternoon, and again, we sincerely thank each of our panelists and all of our attendees. Attendees, just want to remind you that you are muted, but are welcome to click the Q&A feature on the screen and post your comments or questions. Our team will do our best to include any questions or comments you may post. I want to begin with Congressman Cleaver. Good afternoon, Congressman. We welcome you. We know that you see firsthand here in the city of Kansas City the effect of the coronavirus. With the passing of the CARES Act and now the exhausting of those funds, how can minority business owners be sure that they're not going to be left behind in this next round of funding?
Thank you very much for the question. First and foremost, we've got to have the funding approved, and just moments ago, the pro forma session in the Senate ended without an agreement between the Republican-led House and the democratically held, the Republican Senate and the democratically held House. The problems in getting something approved, as you may know, and if you don't know, I think it's important that you do, hinges on a couple of things. We are insisting that the bill that would refund the small business component of the stimulus also include funding for hospitals and hospitals, local governments, and PPP loans and payroll protection loans. And apparently, Mitch McConnell would not agree to do that. And so, they will reconvene next week. But the program is essentially out of money, and so that means they spent $347 billion in 14 days, and so spending that much money, you can understand the negative impact of having it frozen right now. So first of all, we got to get it approved, and some things I can't bend on. Just so you understand, I cannot back away from money going to hospitals, because one of the hospitals that is in desperate need of help is Children's Mercy, and the indigent care facilities at Truman Hospital and Truman East. It's a non-starter for me. You have to run over me with a tractor. I'm just not going to ignore the hospitals, and it also means that people are not even respecting the fact that hospitals all over the country have been inundated with COVID-19 patients, and so we're going to stand up and say no. We're not going to allow funding at a high level in those programs. Now, I think we will eventually get that approved. But right now it's out of money. We got to get money in there, and it's also important to you to know that a number of my colleagues and I have already sent letters to Secretary Mnuchin, telling him that we are concerned that minority businesses may not have been receiving an adequate portion of the CARES Act funding, and what we have said is that we want the money that's going out of the front door to be broken down into categories, so we know what Black and brown people are receiving. There's no way for us to argue, well, minorities are not getting their share, when the truth of the matter is we don't even know, and they have resisted. Now, we met with Secretary Mnuchin. You have to forgive me. I'm in on these calls all day, every day. I think it was yesterday or the day before, and he did agree finally that they would begin to break it down on a basis of Black, brown, and non-minorities. So the Congressional Black Caucus, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, Asian Pacific caucuses are all working together. We call ourselves the Tri-Caucus. We work together, and we're all insisting on this. It's hard to get, when we don't have control. When the side I'm on is pushing this, we don't have control of the Senate, and we're 4 seats behind, and on the Senate side, and we obviously don't have the White House. I would love to be able to say we can guarantee you that we're going to get everything in there that we need to get to help you. But what I can say is that we're going to put every effort into it and fight all the way up to the wall to get it done.
Thank you, Congressman Cleaver. Next question is going to be for Congresswoman Davis. Welcome again. And this is pretty much a similar question. As the funds from the CARES Act have been exhausted, what can minority business owners do? What can even organizations like Mountain Plains do to make sure that our minority business owners are not left behind once the next allocation of funds is granted?
Well, thank you, and I appreciate. I feel like every time I talk, I'm just saying how great I think Congressman Cleaver is. But I really appreciated the comments he was making, and I'm glad you're asking the question, because I think that one of the things that we're seeing, especially with this new class of freshmen that just came into Congress, is that we've got a lot of people who are helping to support some of the work that folks like Congressman Cleaver have been doing for a long time. But there's so many more people right now who are coming through the doors and walking the halls of Congress and voting, that understand that the issues and the barriers and those sorts of things that have been in place for minority business enterprises, and that's a very real issue. And so I would say that in terms of, like, right off the bat, doing things like this, where we've got folks on the line who are part of the business community, sharing stories, asking questions, asking their members of Congress, what are you doing about this? I think that's a really powerful, it's a powerful thing, because what it does is it helps me, it helps all of us be able to make it clear to our colleagues who might not understand some of these issues, with real tangible examples and in a lot of ways statistics. I know the Federal Reserve does a lot of research, and I know I cite the research that they do a lot when it comes to this kind of thing. And then, I think one of the things that's really important is to make sure that those of us who are, I feel like Congressman Cleaver and I have been pushing for a lot of the things that are going to be impactful for MBEs, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing things like this and making sure that everybody knows what we're doing, because when we, what Del was talking about with coalition building and making sure that everybody knows what's going on, that's a way to build up the support for some of these programs that we've been talking about. And I know I mentioned this earlier, but the current funding levels that we're seeing for small businesses and the relief is not enough, and I'm glad to be part of the fight to get some additional funding. But I think Congressman Cleaver hit the nail on the head about the need to make sure that we're prioritizing, or at a bare minimum, that we even understand where is the funding going. And I was part of a group of colleagues calling on Secretary Mnuchin and the chair of the Federal Reserve to prioritize lending to traditionally underserved communities, MBEs, and I think that we have to keep pushing for these things, and we can never assume that people already know about any of these issues. In fact, I always ask people, when you reach out to our office, or if we get the chance to sit down and have a meeting, please don't assume that I already know about something, even if it's an area that I talk about a lot, or that I might have already done something on the issue before. Because I think that what we see a lot of times is things can fall through the cracks. In fact, the PPP program, or the Paycheck Protection Program, one of the things that happened is that there was a lack of guidance from the administration. And I know I mentioned this earlier, but the decision making was left up to the banks, and the banks who are handling the loans. And I think that too many small businesses, for sure, including MBEs, were kind of left out to dry. And I think that, I think McLean hit on that a bit when she was talking. We need to make sure that there's guardrails in place as we're moving forward. And I think Congressman Cleaver talked a bit about that. There's got to be oversight. We have to make sure that as we're continuing to fund the relief programs, that we're also making sure that there's guardrails so that the relief actually reaches the smaller businesses and businesses that aren't coming into it with the advantages that non-MBAs often have. And I'm going to keep working hard on that. And I appreciate all the work that you all are already doing on that too.
Thank you, Congresswoman Davids. Dale, I want to go to you next. We've been talking, as you mentioned, with the coalition of nonprofit organizations serving MBEs. Recently, the Federal Reserve conducted a survey of small business owners. As it pertains to responses from minority business owners, what is the data suggesting about the impact on MBEs, their stabilization, and ultimately their ability to recover?
Yeah, this is a good question. To backtrack half a step, I'm very blessed to be able to work for a president like President Esther George, who takes the regionalism seriously and diversity and inclusion seriously. And my bosses, Tammy Edwards and Jackson Winsett, who've really given me a free hand over the past few years to work on issues of community color and entrepreneurship. And we're going to continue to do that. We'll be releasing a guide in hopefully by June 15th on a guide to recovery for small businesses, communities of color. A lot of it informed by what you suggest, which is the survey of small business owners. And what is consistent and what we see is that this crisis is just exacerbating or shining an even broader spotlight on the cracks that already existed, which is the lower levels of capitalization, greater challenges in the credit market, greater challenges in hiring and retaining employees that have been traditional amongst our Latino Blacks and other ethnic minority groups that have been working to start businesses. And this has been a consistent thing going back through history. So there's nothing really new here, but what you can essentially say is that it's shining a magnifying glass on it. And what we're seeing now is multiplying the problem by tenfold, which is why we're seeing so many minority firms saying that they're going to close and may not ever recover. So the important thing that we need to do outside of anything that's federal policy, which is outside of a lot of us as practitioners' control, is really, again, to work together to identify the gaps that we can serve at the community level, because all charity starts at home. And our community will have to rally together, whether it's be it in advocacy, whether it's be it a new program design, whether it's being just calling somebody and saying, hey, how are you doing? How can I help you? Can I support you? Which is huge in a time of social isolation and distancing, and we underestimate that form of social capital in our communities. I know Congressman is a pastor, and historically African Americans have rallied together at the church and similar type of institutions during times of crisis, and we cannot do that now. So it's even more important that we figure out ways that we can coordinate our activities and actions together to first mutually support each other, develop collaborations and advocacy, but then also ask each other how we can help us collectively recover, and then utilize stimulus money when it does come the best possible way. And I know McLean is going to talk more about policy, so I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Dale. McLean, we're going to go to you. You're a part of one of the largest equity movements in the country with KC Rising. What should policymakers take into account when drafting legislation to specifically affect recovery for MBEs? And I think this is highly important considering this next round of funding that our two Congress members are trying to pass as well.
So, I guess we have to keep in mind that in order to achieve parity and equity, you have to do some things that aren't equitable. You have to do things that give communities in need more than you might otherwise give other people in order to get everybody operating on par. And so that's something that we have to keep in mind with KC Rising. And I think that it will behoove all of Congress. I know that the two representatives on this panel certainly understand to keep in mind as well. And so the relief and recovery that will be needed for minorities is going to be, above and maybe even separate and apart from what others in the country would need. In terms of advocacy, the coalition building is necessary because there's the message is amplified and more attention is paid to it. The more folks are rallying around a specific policy agenda. And just speaking as someone who was on the staff of a former elected, I mean, the more calls and the more emails and the more door knocks that we got, the more we paid attention. And the more specific the ask, the more likely we were to pay attention. The more well-researched the ask, the more likely we were to pay attention. And so as organizations are coalescing together, going to your elected officials and your members of Congress with specific asks that are based in research, I think will go much further than what I think a lot of us feel right now in terms of, the emotional arguments. So, some of the suggestions that that Dell made in terms of what would be appropriate to include in the next iteration of stimulus or the next iteration of PPP, there needs to be an expedited process for banks that aren't already SBA certified to get certified, because that will help with the backlog, and that will help kind of open up the relationship chain so that folks that have been traditionally left out of, traditional banking institution relationships have an opportunity to access these funds. I mean, so KC Rising specific, one of our main focus areas is essentially small business and innovation. And we have recently put together a DE&I committee that then makes recommendations on who to appoint to the committees for our focus areas. And so in the last year, we made sure to have much greater minority participation from folks that own small businesses themselves, to make sure that that perspective is being taken into account in our own advocacy efforts, or even in just the programs that we support, or the best practices that we tout different organizations or foundations or whatever should use as their thinking guideposts. So I don't know if I think I kind of got away from your question, other than to say that, KC Rising is very much focused on equity, very much focused on equity for small businesses. And that was, I think, the primary reason why we were one of the founding organizations of the ALTCAP Rapid Response Fund that Dell mentioned, is out of sheer acknowledgement that, something has to be done quick, and specifically for businesses that won't be able to access the PPP dollars from traditional banks.
Thank you, McLean. That's a perfect segue into the next question. Congresswoman Davids, following the declaration of a national emergency, the U.S. Department of Labor's Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs issued a national interest exemption memorandum to facilitate response efforts for COVID-19. That waiver extends to all affirmative action obligations of supply and service and construction contracts. We're getting calls from many of our MBEs that are saying they are not being utilized. What oversight exists to ensure MBEs, minorities, and women benefit from the billions of dollars in spending and hiring?
Well, the first thing I want to say is how frustrating and it's just to see that waiver or that exemption memorandum and its effects is it's really frustrating to eliminate the oversight for those crucial obligations at a time when we know that minority businesses and communities of color are already being hurt. They're disproportionately. It's a lot of communities of color, minority communities, are being disproportionately affected by the spread of COVID-19, and that's both health outcomes and economic outcomes. I think it's unacceptable, and it's unfortunately it is the OFCCP or the Federal Contract Compliance Programs Office that conducts the oversight to ensure that the obligations are being met by federal contractors. I think it's reprehensible that the administration has chosen to forego that duty in a time of crisis. That's why I've been pushing for us to have additional oversight measures in our. I was pushing for it in the last package. I'm going to continue to push for it in the next package that we see, because this is exactly the time when we need to make sure that we're reaching the MBEs with our federal contracting and getting those contracts with minority businesses, and we have a lot to learn from our past mistakes, and making sure that we have robust accountability and transparency measures in place is one of those lessons that we should learn, and especially when it comes to things that are this consequential. We're not just talking about people's livelihoods. We're talking about people's lives, like ability to access these contracts is. This is how people put food on their tables. So I'm going to keep. It's completely unacceptable, and I'm going to keep pushing to try to get more oversight there.
Thank you, Congresswoman Davids. Congressman Cleaver, the City of Kansas City recently partnered with ALCAP, a community development finance institution, and much like the Hire Fund in Kansas to support the hospitality industry, the fund was exhausted in a matter of hours, essentially. If you've talked about the hospitals and getting funding there, as well as some of our other critical organizations, but what about our community development organizations, our other nonprofits, such as the Hispanic Chamber, Heartland Black Chamber, Asian Chamber, the Native American Chamber, and even Mountain Plains?
Thank you. First of all, we were successful in getting money placed in the first stimulus for minority chambers, any of them. However, the money was granted through threats and nasty language and everything else to get it in there. But we only were able to get $10 million with an M in that budget. Now, if you or I had $10 million, in our pockets, we'd be in tall cotton, as they say in Texas, where I grew up. But $10 million nationally is nothing. It was put in there like, okay, quit screaming at us. Now we are going to push again, but keep in mind that in one of my subcommittees, we handled the community development block grant program, and we were able to get about $600 million more this past year. And then we just got 4.6, I think, $4.6 million in this program for CDBG. Now the money has to be spent to address the issues related to the COVID-19 pandemic and the entities that have been impacted by it. But what we do is we send the money down, and a big portion of it went to the state government. And it's something that people don't really, I think, understand, is that we give the state of Missouri I don't even remember what it is in the stimulus, but they received a big chunk of community development dollars for the whole state. And then the entitlement cities, Kansas City, St. Louis, Springfield, and Independence, they get a specific amount. Same thing is true with the Kansas City, Kansas, Wichita, Kansas, and Topeka are entitlement cities. And so they get a specific amount. And so what happens is that people just concentrate on trying to get grants from the municipalities. And I'm suggesting that the state gets quadruple that amount of money. And in many cases, the state can use it in other, they can move it to, we moved it to help, in social services or in the labor department. So the public has to stay on that even after we have committed those dollars. And I want to remind you what I said earlier. Congress adjourned today, the Senate adjourned the pro forma without getting anything done. And so they're not going to be eager to do the things that we want to do, which is why, it hasn't been done. Now, we had 70,000 small businesses to apply up until yesterday, 70,000. And so when people would ask me about the program, I said, yeah, you file tonight. This is not something you wait around to do. You file tonight, because the SBA was operating, and the only way they could operate, first come, first serve. And so every minority person that I spoke with, from the largest in Kansas City to the smallest, I've said, file tonight. Well, I still have some questions. File tonight. Well, I may need to file tonight. You want to get into the system, and if you have to answer some questions later, fine. So back to the helping minority businesses, we are going to continue to push to get money out here in the community. We were able to get $349 billion in the first package. That's all gone. So we're going to work on more. And we are pushing for money to go to CDFIs. We are trying to get money, frankly, to go to some of the smaller banks. Some of the smaller banks can't even participate in the program because their asset level is too low. So there are all kinds of issues that we are confronted with, which we are confronted, but we still have to go out and push, and we are going to do that. We're trying to get something called Main Street loans available. So anyway, we are available for any further discussion.
Thank you, Congressman. McLean, health officials are now grappling with the fact that the coronavirus deaths have a disproportionate impact on Black people. In fact, even in the Guardian news publication, it's calling the coronavirus epidemic a racial justice issue. Are we starting to see a shift in policymaking as it relates to equity and inclusion? And if so, how's policymaking shifting to address equity and inclusion?
I think at this point, we're seeing more of a change in thinking that will hopefully precede a change in policymaking. There are policymakers are under a lot of pressure right now to take into account how COVID-19 is disparately impacting communities of color in all the various different outcome areas, whether it be contracting the virus, to dying from the virus, to losing your job or your business because of the virus, to losing your home because of the virus, to and this is something that predated, and all this stuff, all these inequities predated the virus, but to an inability to socialize, and how that compounds already existing, mental health challenges, or the ability to apply for jobs or benefits, or all the multitude of things that have moved online right now because of the digital divide. And so I think, on a local level, I know that there's an effort underway in the city of Kansas City, Missouri, to adopt an ordinance that would allow some health levy funds to go to the urban hospitals and health systems so that they can ramp up testing and processing of those tests and outreach to people that have been tested to talk to them about, what measures they need to take to quarantine and protect themselves and protect those that they love. So that's an example of, a policy response to the inequities. The think tanks are certainly talking about it and realize it and have done the analysis to support the need for relief and recovery that is specifically curtailed to the needs of minority populations. And I think that, at local levels, you're seeing it more than you are on the state level and on the federal level, that there are some, right-sized policy adoptions to address the challenges that are being faced by communities of color. But I don't, you're starting to see it, but it hasn't fully manifested itself, especially not to the degree necessary to really have an impact, in my opinion.
Thank you, McLean. Dale, the world learned some key economic lessons with the 2008 bankruptcy of Lehman Brothers and even the 2010 sovereign debt crisis in Greece, a relatively small European country, which actually slowed global recovery. Should these events sensitize U.S. economy policymakers in the same way to better understand the trajectory for economic recovery post-COVID-19?
I think it will. I think there were some lessons learned that'll probably be taken into account. But I do want to pivot a little bit from that and put on my economic developer hat and talk mostly about recovery for MBEs and community of color. I think one of the things that this crisis has also illuminated is the critical importance of broadband in communities of color and small rural communities. And this, in my opinion, again, should be considered as critical infrastructure, because this is one of the things that has stopped, a lot of minority firms from pivoting to even be able to adapt to the virus and the pandemic as it is now with their business. And this includes also digital literacy and not just the access to the broadband. So that's point one. I know that my colleague Jeremy Hagley has launched a laptop donation challenge to get corporations to donate laptops to disadvantaged school districts, but that's just a start. We need to look at this as a national policy action on how we ensure that everybody has key access to the internet. And this is going to help, our minority firms significantly, because a lot of them have no or limited access and limited ability to utilize the data skills. So that's part one. Two is we have to look for some, again, this is definitely my opinion, critical reforms in the lending environment. Disproportionately, minorities are being shown that we have lower credit scores, worse outcomes because we're under collateralized, and we've been put, 2 steps back from the start of launching our firms. And so when vulnerable things happen, like recessions, it knocks us down faster. So we need to be able to figure that out, whether it's looking at flexible alternatives into how we analyze credit, looking at different ways of collateralizing or utilizing different resources to be able to support that. And then finally, what I would say for our minority firms and firms in communities of color is that we need a better knowledge network and information sharing and education system in place, because a lot of us also are not accessing critical networks of knowledge and information. We're not able to pivot as fast as we should because we're not connected. And a lot of us are never given, fundamental understanding of how to be great entrepreneurs. And this even exacerbates the problem during a recession, because we are not nimble enough in many instances because we don't understand a lot of the processes of businesses as it relates to other groups. And so if we knock out those 3 things or really hammer on those things, I guarantee you this: if there's another recession that comes, we will weather the storm as minority firms much better. Oh, one last point, and this is a nod to Mountain Plains. The critical importance of supplier diversity in these supply chains cannot be underestimated. These things can make or break large segments of the minority entrepreneur population. A lot of the critical resources and contracts that can come through these firms and these government sources can literally change and transform entire communities. And so we need to keep an eye on supplier diversity, ensuring that our corporations and government institutions are being true to supplier diversity, not just the letter of the law, but also the spirit of the law, if you want to call it that. And then we will do much better in any recession that comes down the road.
Thank you, Dale. We appreciate those remarks. McLean, we want to go to you for final remarks.
Well, I guess I'll conclude with thanking you all again for inviting me to participate and share my perspective, share the perspective of the Civic Council. I think of all the organizations represented on here, I'm probably the least known, but we are a membership organization of the CEOs and C-suite level executives of the larger employers of the region, and we're all our primary concern is the economic vitality of the region. And so we know that our region cannot prosper if certain segments of our population are lagging. And, you know, the lagging sections of our population are communities of color. And so we as an organization are working to make sure that our members understand the barriers that communities of color have faced, and to understand what our role is to bring about equity. And so, you know, there's been no time in my lifetime that has shed a greater light on the inequities than now. And so we are certainly paying attention and aiming to be responsive and do what we can. But, you know, like any organization that has, you know, any level of power, we need to be challenged. And so I would appreciate hearing from, you know, anyone on this call that is being directly impacted about what we could do to better advocate for you. And just encourage everybody to stay motivated and stay positive, but not complacent, and do all that you can to advocate for yourself in these times. But know that you've got a bunch of people, including those of us on this call, who are committed to ensuring that our collective voices are heard at all levels. So I just appreciate the opportunity to participate.
Thank you, McLean. Dale, we don't want to cut you short, so if you could take a minute to give some final remarks.
Yes, I'll echo McLean in appreciating, you know, the ability to participate and being able to share the conversation with Congressman and Congresswoman. I appreciate both of you for what you're doing at the national level on this very important issue, and I just want to thank you for that. My encouragement is directly to the MBEs. We really want you to hold on by any means necessary, to quote Malcolm X. You know, connect with support providers that can give you insight and information, that can share resources and knowledge, because the objective is to keep you surviving as we go through this. You know, if it requires you to make a pivot, then get support to make that pivot. If it requires you collaboration or even joining with another firm to stay in business, then I encourage you to do that. And so we want you to be able to survive at any cost so that you can weather the storm and rapidly rebuild the economy, because we know that, as research shows, minority firms disproportionately hire minority employees. And so it's not just a firm level challenge that we're looking at, but we're looking at the benefits to the whole community and also to the nation as a whole, because we know that we're moving into minority-majority territory with our population. And so to the degree in which we can sustain and support our minority firms, to the degree the national economy is going to survive overall. And so again, just keep on keeping on.
Thank you, Dale. Congresswoman Davids, final remarks.
Oh, thank you. Well, I think the last thing I want to just say is that I really appreciate the opportunity to participate today, to hear from the other folks about just the impacts that we're seeing. And, you know, the health, safety, and security of our community is my top priority. And I'm going to keep doing everything I can to ensure that we're getting the relief that we need to the people who need it the most, and that there's proper oversight. And I think, you know, just kind of big picture, not just as a member of Congress, but as a part of this community, I have been blown away by the work that we've seen from OCAP and Casey Rising and all the different groups that have been putting their heart and soul into trying to help other people and our frontline workers. And this is an unprecedented time, and I know that the difficulties that people are facing are it can be overwhelming. And I think that when I get to participate in this kind of activity, I feel like we're talking about heavy stuff, but it is heartwarming to hear so many people who are really trying to do something. So thank you all for all the work you are doing. And thank you again for inviting me to be part of this.
Thank you. And we hope you'll come back. We definitely want to be respectful of the time as we've gone over. And as all of you who have heard Congressman Cleaver before, you know that we would be remiss if we did not give him the final remarks. For those of us in the Kansas City area, we know that you do not speak after Congressman Cleaver. So with that, Congressman, in all due respect, we give you the floor.
Well, you're very kind to get us all together. We are going to come out of this. There's no question in my mind, but that we are going to come out of it. The worst thing that can happen is that if we come out of this terrible moment in our history and we're not better as a nation. And one of the ways we are better is that every single segment of the nation should be better, not just the corporate level. And so we are going to struggle. We're going to push and fight and pull and get knocked down and get up and fight again. The worst thing we can do is to accept defeat on any of the issues that are important to any of those of us who are dealing with minority issues. Everybody's got to go if there's going to be any going. I was on a call last week with barbers and hairstylists, and most of them qualify for none of these programs, and so they are prohibited from working on anything because their very work means they have to come in contact with people, physical contact. So if you just think about all of society, there are so many components that we have to think of and work for. But we're not going to give up. We're not going to give out, and we're not going to give in. We're going to continue to push and fight and pull. And then when we get knocked down, we're going to get up, and hopefully you guys will have some energy that you can transmit to us so that we can keep getting up and down. God bless everybody. Thank you.
God bless you. We thank you as well for taking the time. And we want to thank all of our panelists. We want to thank all of our attendees. We appreciate each of you and we appreciate the service of our panelists to our MBEs and all of their respective constituents.
Unknown participant is now exiting.
At this time, we want to turn the mic over to our host, Belinda Hooks. Thank you.
We hope that the information you've gained today was insightful. The Mountain Plains Minority Supplier Development Council is here to support our MBEs and corporate members. We could not get this done today without Clifton Clark of Computer Decisions. Computer Decisions is a certified minority business enterprise specializing in IT support across the country. So we do definitely want to thank you, Clifton, for all of your support and work with the Mountain Plains Council. Equally important is the MPMSDC staff. Certainly want to thank and acknowledge and recognize Tashana Dawkins, Sol Ibarra, Marvin Lyman, and our very own President and CEO, Stan Senna. We also appreciate the work of Marjorie Williams and Randy McCall of the Denver Minority Business Development Agency, operated through a special grant to the Mountain Plains MSDC. On next Thursday, we hope that you will join us at the same time for a look at access to capital for MBEs. And you have the slide in front.
Is now exiting.
You should receive an invite tomorrow to register for the April 23rd virtual town hall. We ask that you check your email for a link to the MPMSDC website containing a recording of today's virtual town hall, or visit us directly at www.mpmsdc.org. Remember, we are all in this together. Hold on by any means necessary. Please be safe and have a wonderful day. Thank you for attending today's virtual town hall meeting.